Manufacturing Matters is an MFG Radio Network production brought to you by GIE Media's Manufacturing Group as industry experts take deep dives into the latest manufacturing matters, whether it's new innovations, products, technologies, and emerging markets that help you understand better why manufacturing matters to you and also to the top companies in the medical, aerospace, defense, and electric vehicle manufacturing industries.
Hello, and welcome to Supply Chain Management in Aerospace Manufacturing, Sales and Operations Planning, S&OP, brought to you by Aerospace Manufacturing and Design Magazine and the M. Ryan Group. I'm Eric Brothers, editor for the magazine and the moderator. Sales and Operations Planning, or S&OP, has the goal to link demand, sales, supply, purchasing, and finance to meet the needs of the business and its customers. The bottom line is it's about the right people talking about the right things at the right time. S&OP can help improve revenue, fill rate, and inventory turns by connecting people, process, and technology. First, a few words about our presenter. Mike Ryan is known for his ability to quickly break down complex supply chain problems and identify actions to generate cash, improve earnings before income taxes, depreciation, and amortization, or EBITDA, and create repeatable and consistent results. He's a seasoned supply chain operations executive with 25 plus years of industry experience, delivering results for manufacturing and distribution businesses. Mike's experience includes roles where he's driven organizational change, working closely with portfolio company leadership. Prior to founding his consulting firm in 2016, Michael held global supply chain and operations leadership roles that have been based on collaboration between sales, finance, supply chain, and manufacturing, with companies such as General Electric and the Goodyear Tire and Rubber Company. Before we begin, we'd like to thank sponsors. Carlisle Interconnect Technologies, or Carlisle IT, is one of the world's leading designers and manufacturers of high-performance wire and cable, including fiber optics. Since its inception in 1940, the company has grown its product portfolio to include specialty and filtered connectors, contacts, integrated systems, and cable assemblies, complex harnesses, racks, avionics trays, and installation kits. In addition to its vast product breadth, Carlisle IT provides customers with a higher level of support by offering engineering and certification services for the demanding environments of the commercial aerospace, military and defense, electronics, industrial, test and measurement, and medical industries. For more information, please visit www.carlisleit.com. Aerospace and high-value manufacturing. For more than 50 years, industrial metrology has been at the core of Renishaw's business. Renishaw technology can be applied throughout the manufacturing process of a complex aerospace part. They offer solutions to help aerospace manufacturers perform repeatable, traceable, and efficient work to the finest tolerances so that every component meets its design intent. Discover more at www.renishaw.com/aerospace. We'd also like to thank Schunk is a world leader in tooling, tool holding, and work holding, gripping, and automation technology. The family-owned company is pushing the development and digitalization of its product and service portfolio to make industrial processes more efficient, transparent, and sustainable. With more than 11,000 standard components, Schunk offers the world's largest assortment of gripping systems and clamping technology from one source. In addition, customers benefit from the company's comprehensive application knowledge surrounding tomorrow's innovative manufacturing. SMW Autoblock is a work holding company focused on achieving customers' goals and expectations with the highest quality products and services. SMW Autoblock combines stock standard product with a highly trained sales, service, and engineering team to consistently provide the ideal work holding solutions to customers across a wide variety of industries. The organization strives to achieve a deeper understanding of customers' needs to provide products and services geared towards specific customer applications, maintaining long-term, mutually beneficial partnerships to enhance machine tools and drive modern manufacturing. Welcome, Mr. Ryan.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to be here today. I'm excited. This is an industry that I've got some experience in, and from my perspective, anytime I can save somebody a headache or a heartache, I am happy to do that. So what we're going to talk about specifically today is supply chain management through the lens of sales and operations planning. Just to set the stage, with sales and operations planning, the goal is to link sales, right? That's demand, supply, so that's purchasing and manufacturing, and finance to meet the needs of the business and its customers. So it all, right, from my perspective, is, let's begin with the end in mind. So if you are seeing warning signs, and this can be externally focused, where the CEO may be getting calls from angry customers, and it ties back to poor delivery, maybe that the sales team is not meeting their sales goals, or, worst case, you're losing business to competition, right? So that's some of the warning signs. Internally, right, and this is where we're going to spend a lot of our time, looking at manufacturing disruptions. So aerospace, right, the customers, especially if it's a government contract, have very high expectations. So, if your fill rates drop below 95 or 90%, there's going to be problems. Typically, this comes from a misalignment between supply and demand. Sometimes some of the remedies are, hey, we're going to run some overtime. We're going to try to do as much as we can to get as much as we can out the door as quickly as possible. And fundamentally, if the business isn't running smoothly, where you're profitable one month and you're losing the next month, it all comes back to, are we aligned? Are we aligned across the functions, right? And one kind of telltale or warning sign for me is meeting as a team only when there's a problem, right? So, looking across the scope of this, of all these warning signs, one of the solutions is to leverage S&OP, or sales and operations planning, because it can help mitigate risk. Now, if we take kind of a look back, go in the time machine and think about what the supply chain was like pre-COVID. Pre-COVID, there was a lot more predictability. We had what we need. Businesses were operating on just-in-time manufacturing. There was that predictability and consistency that, hey, I know if I order today and there's a 48-hour lead time, I'm going to get it on Friday. As a cost-cutting or efficiency, attempt at efficiency, a lot of business went to single-sourced or sole-source suppliers, right? So, hey, instead of spreading out my volume across 2 or 3 suppliers, I'm going to give one supplier all my volume. In return, I'm going to get a price break. And as we looked at the business, whether it's the revenue coming in through sales or the cost that's associated with procurement and manufacturing, everything was relatively stable. If there was a problem, it tended to be localized. So, there may be a hurricane in the Gulf, but it typically, impacted businesses around that. So when something went wrong, or something literally or figuratively went off the tracks, it was typically localized. And what this gave us was predictable revenue, predictable cost, and predictable profit, right? So pre-COVID, everything was predictable. Now, right, move forward a little bit, and what we saw during COVID, and has had lingering knock-on effects, is that all of a sudden our lead times got much, much longer. So something that may have been available to you in 6 weeks, all of a sudden is taking 6 weeks, or 16 weeks, or 12 weeks, or 18 weeks. So what we started to see was, especially in businesses where the planning horizon was shorter than the lead time, it created a ton of risk in the business, because the business had to react. And what this means is, hey, if I'm not planning 6 months out, but my parts, my materials are taking 6 months to get here, right? I'm either going to overbuy, because that's the, quite frankly, the safer bet. I'm going to overbuy. I'm going to bring a ton of materials in. because I may need it, or when I need it, I may not be able to get it. Or you could roll the dice and say, hey, I'm going to buy for the next 3 months. And, when I get to month 4, hope that I've got enough product to sustain me. So the big shift, and this is what caught a ton of businesses off guard, is they were planning, maybe a month out or 2 months out. And the way I describe it is, imagine you're standing up and you have your head down and you're just looking at the next 12 inches in front of your feet, right? So if your head's down, you're not going to see a boulder that's 15 yards down the path, right? Because you're not looking that far out. So when the planning horizon is less than lead time, it creates a ton of risk because you're all reactionary. There is no being planful. It's completely reactionary. So what COVID helped a lot of businesses see is that we had to extend our planning horizon. We needed to look further out, right? In effect, we needed to pick our heads up. So that boulder that was 15 yards down the road that we didn't see when we had our heads down, we could look further down and plan around it or plan ahead of it. And, as we think about the planning process, how do we get everybody to communicate? How do we get sales to communicate with operations, operations to communicate with finance, finance to communicate with procurement, right? If these links of the supply chain are either non-existent or broken, right, we're going to have a lot of risk. So it's one thing to extend our planning horizon outside of lead time, and then yet it's another thing to start putting it all together. So, as we look at S&OP, the bottom line really is it's about the right people talking about the right things at the right time, right? And it's simple. I know it may sound pedantic, but fundamentally, if the right people aren't talking about the right things at the right time, there will be problems. So that's what S&OP is all about. Sales and operations planning is an integrated planning process that links sales, manufacturing, finance, and supply chain. And what this does, and it all starts with sales, it all begins with demand. It's help me understand what I expect to sell, when, to whom, and how many. So if there's a big promotion that's coming up in 6 months, or I've got a new contract starting in the next 6 months, right? We need to have that visibility because we can't wait to the last minute. In most industrial businesses, most highly value-added manufacturing processes, they take time. So by understanding, what's coming in from sales, we can do a better job planning across the business. So S&OP, links sales, finance, manufacturing, and supply chain to create a common plan. I mean, think about as literally singing off the same sheet of music, right? That's what S&OP is all about. From having a common plan, then we can create a uniform process. So we all know what we're being measured on. Our goals are all aligned. And by having those goals aligned, it's going to help improve our performance. So, when something happens that we may not expect to happen, it could be good, it could be bad, right? It helps us respond and be more planful and prepare for the next event. And ultimately, right, it comes back to everybody talking. Right? That's the collaborative environment. So it's when a problem or an opportunity arises, it's not one person or one function trying to figure out what the solution is. It's saying, hey, I've got this opportunity. My competitor dropped the ball. I have an opportunity to pick up this new business and get some incremental growth. Finance, do we have the money to buy the parts we need? Manufacturing, do you have the staffing, the capacity, and the capability to put all these parts together, right? It's not just sales saying, yeah, we'll take it. It's understanding, hey, can we afford to take it? Can we manufacture it? Can we ship it? So, communication ties this whole process together. And, one of the things I found is, my first experience with S&OP was at Goodyear. And the person who had started the process there was very much a gimme, gimme, gimme. I need this information. I need this. And gimme, gimme, gimme. And he was getting a lot of resistance. And the reason why was because he wasn't helping, across the functions. He wasn't helping the people across the business understand, what's in it for me. Right? You're asking me for all this data, you're asking me for all my input, you're asking me for all my knowledge, but what am I going to get out of it in return? And the idea is sales and operations planning truly is a cross-functional process. And each person, each function that participates in the process will get something out of the process. So if I'm sales and, I'm being asked, hey, what's going on with your customers? What's going on in the market? What are the trends you're seeing? Hey, I've got to take time away from my customers to share that information. But in return, they're going to get a more reliable product supply. Because if manufacturing and supply chain knows how much, to whom, and when, right, they can do a better job fulfilling it. For marketing, it's understanding, hey, we've got new products coming in, we've got old products going out, and how do we make sure that change in demand and change in supply is captured, right? For manufacturing, it's being able to plan 3, 6, 9, 12 months out to say, hey, you know what? I've got a lull in August sales, so I'm going to scale back my production in August, right? So it's keeping in tune with what the revenue and the demand plan is. For procurement, it's saying, hey, how much do I need to go buy? When? From who? And right, this is where we really start to stitch the process together. And then from there, it's finance being able to say, hey, here's my revenue projection, high case, low case, mid case. Manufacturing, here's my capacity plan or my staffing plan, high case, low case, mid case, and it lets finance work up a matrix of, hey, we think our profit's going to be from this range to this range because all this information is coming together. And then for the executive leadership team, the biggest thing that S&OP does is it creates accountability for performance. So, hey, if sales is above or below target or manufacturing is above or below target, we can have conversations around, hey, what's the gap? What do we need to do differently going forward? Because it's a continuous process. It's a continuous feedback loop, right? And the common thread through all of sales and operations planning is that communication. So because I am an engineer by trade, and I've heard a lot of businesses say, oh, we've got a process, we've got a process. For me, it's critical to create alignment around what a process exactly, what it means to truly have a process, right? And there's 4 keys, right? Think about it as 4 legs on a chair. Number 1, it's got to be definable. Like you can literally draw a picture of it. This happens and this happens and this happens. And if there's any rework, this happens and it comes back in line. So you need to be able to draw a picture of it. It needs to be predictable in that you know what the result will be, right? So if I come into my office, turn on the light switch, and one time my desk lamp goes on, and another time the air conditioner goes on, and another time the radio goes on, right? It's not predictable. Repeatable means the same thing happens every single time, right? So we need those 3 legs to begin with: definable, predictable, repeatable. And then the 4th leg, it's that it's got to be trainable. you need to be able to bring other people into the process so that they can learn and grow, right? Because as other people come into the process, right, that frees you up to do bigger and better things. So definable, predictable, repeatable, and trainable. Otherwise, we don't have a process. So as we start, really getting into the meat of the S&OP process, right, it's a closed loop, right? It's a feedback loop. It's a process of continuous improvement. In S&OP, there's typically 5 meetings a month, right? And these are highly structured. They are decision-making meetings where it begins and ends with demand. So sales, what are you going to sell, to whom, how many, and when, right? So we get demand right. We get consensus and agreement on what the demand is going to be. We look at the number of units. We look at the number of dollars. Then supply, right? Supply looks at their inventory, whether it's the raw material inventory or work in process or finished goods. Supply takes into account, hey, here's what we have today, and here's what we need to make moving forward. And then the partnership meeting is where demand and supply get balanced. So, if we look out to September and we're going to sell 20% more product, but manufacturing can't necessarily supply it all in 1 month, how do we take that supply and smooth it out? So when we get to the point where the demand for the product materializes, we have the product to support it. From the partnership meeting, we go into the executive S&OP process, right? And that's where it brings it together. How did we do with demand, our plan versus actual for last month, supply plan versus actual for last month, and then what does the forecast look like going forward? And then the last part of the cycle, the last part of the loop, is where we bring new products or new services into the process. So if I say, hey, I'm going to launch this new product in October, I need to make sure it's baked into the demand plan, which then translates to the supply plan to say, okay, if I need to have it ready to ship in October, I need to make it in September, and I need to have the raw materials available at the end of July or the beginning of August. So by feeding in new products, that's what closes a loop into the demand plan. So every month is this process of, rinse or lather, rinse, and repeat. So it's, it begins with demand, translate demand to supply, balance supply and demand in the partnership meeting, look at the prior month's results and the path forward in the executive S&OP, and then bring new products into the process. So S&OP is a closed loop process that begins and ends with demand and is 100% feedback driven and continuous improvement focused. Okay. So, one of the questions I get a lot, and rightfully so, is, when we go to implement S&OP, will the juice be worth the squeeze? And we'll walk through a series of case studies, examples where S&OP was the key enabler, right? Because it brought the business together. It got the right people talking about the right things at the right time. It brought the business together to help improve revenue, right? Top line, fill rate, on-time delivery, and our inventory turns. It helped us be more effective and efficient with cash. And we do this by connecting people, process, and technology. So just like we have 4 legs of the stool with process, definable, predictable, repeatable, and trainable, we need to link the process with people and then technology to support it. Okay, so the next few slides, these are real life examples. First one, manufacturing business, roughly $80 million in revenue, made capital equipment. So each one of these machinery, to some extent, was bespoke, right? They had base pieces of equipment, and then the customers could could tailor them or attributes to their specific needs. And what we saw in this business was, the CFO, raised their hand and said, hey, we've got a giant bubble on the balance sheet. We've got a ton of cash tied up. Don't know how it got here. Don't know how we're going to get rid of it, but we know we've got a problem. And in this case, what kind of tripped the trigger, so to speak, is that for this capital equipment manufacturing business, they had bumped up against their line of credit. So, in this case, I think it was a $30 million line of credit. They got to 28 million and change. Banker calls up and says, hey, you guys are running into a hard ceiling. We can't let you borrow any more money. So in assessing the business, one of the things that we found was that the inventory was growing faster than sales, right? So take the balance sheet, look at history and say, hey, over the last 12 months, your inventory is growing at a 45-degree angle, but your sales are growing at a 15-degree angle. What's going on? So as we started to dig deeper into the balance sheet, deeper into the inventory, almost 90% of all their inventory was in raw materials, right? So these are pieces and parts. Some were stock, some were custom, but the bulk of the balance sheet, and quite frankly, the bulk of the credit line was tied up in parts that were sitting on a shelf. And as we dug deeper, what we realized is that the sales team had put together an AOP. Sales team had put together an annual operating plan that said, hey, we're going to do this. We're going to sell this across the full year. We are going to sell 25 units a month, right? That's the plan. So sourcing, supply chain, the buyer, they took the plan and they simply executed to the plan. The problem is that the sales team was not selling 25 units a month. They were selling anywhere from 19 to 21 units a month. So we had far more coming into the building and on the balance sheet than was going out the door that we were, able to invoice and get paid for. So quickly, right, this was an S&OP process. Well, there wasn't an S&OP process when we started. The existing practices in the business is that sales, manufacturing, and supply chain really, they weren't communicated, right? Sales sign off on their plan on January 1st, and we're off to the races. Procurement took the plan, heads down and just executed. And ultimately, it was the CFO who sounded the alarm to say, hey, we don't have enough revenue coming in and we're tying up too much cash. So by implementing an S&OP process in this business, understanding that, right, we've got to go back to sales. Don't tell me you're going to sell 25 a month when you've been demonstrating 19 to 21 a month, right? So let's update the plan. Let's update the AOP. Let's take it to the board. Let's help them understand why. And then following on from that, it's getting purchasing to work with their suppliers to say, hey, I've got too much, right? I want to let you know now that I'm not going to be ordering again for another 4 weeks or another 6 weeks. And when I do order, it's going to be half of what I historically have been ordering. So the bottom line result by implementing the sales and operations planning process is that we freed up almost $7 million in cash in 9 months. And then on top of that, right, or through it, we took out just over 40% in inventory, and we were able to close a secondary warehouse, right? And this all comes down to getting the right people at the right time, talking about the right things. Okay, all right, so that's case study number one. Number two, this is my favorite one. So this is another capital equipment supplier, right? They were a precision tool manufacturer, neat business. They were in the enviable position that they could literally sell every machine they could build. And if you ordered on January 1st, you'd get your machine sometime around the middle of June. So this is, this was a case where customers wanted their product faster, and they were even willing to pay a premium to get it faster. Insult to injury was when we actually looked at, order date to ship date, their on-time delivery was 20%, right? Which is abysmal. And it's not like, hey, they were a day late or a couple days late. We're talking about weeks and months late, right? So somebody would order January 1, expected to get it, the middle of June, and they were lucky if they'd see it by the end of July or August. So they were really, really, really frustrating their customers. So in this case, right, this all comes back to communication. Part of it was understanding, what the true demand was. Hey, if I can make, 5 machines a month, but I can sell 7 machines a month, right? We don't have a demand problem, we have a supply problem. So as we started to work with the supply team, the manufacturing and production team, what we found was truly a complete breakdown in communication. So because these pieces of equipment are bespoke, right? It's imagine ordering a Porsche, right? I want a cherry red Porsche with black leather interior, right? And I put my order into the factory. But a few weeks or a month down the line, let's say a month into the 6-month lead time, my wife says, I don't want black seats, right? They're going to get hot in the summer. I want tan seats. Okay, right? So I call up and I put a change order in. And the change order was the bottleneck, the breakdown in this business, where somebody would put a change order in, right? The VP of engineering was responsible for reviewing and signing off their change order. And then the VP of engineering would acknowledge it, approve it, put it in an electronic folder on a network drive. The problem was that the production line wouldn't become aware of the change order until 2, 3, 4, 5 days, sometimes a week. And what that caused was the production line would literally have to unwind everything they built over the last 7 days, implement the change order, make the change, and then build it back up. So it wasn't uncommon for 2 to 3 weeks of production to be effectively lost because there was this work and rework, all because there wasn't a process of communication. So what we did is, at a very high level and very simple, it was understanding, getting input from sales, getting input from manufacturing to say, hey, manufacturing, if we had better communication, instead of taking 6 months, could you build the machine in 5 months or 4.5 months? So by figuring out what the disconnect was in the communication, we were able to increase, it was 8.5%, 9%, very, very quickly. And the key unlock, and one of the reasons I love telling this story, is explaining to the VP of engineering, hey, you can't just put the note in the electronic folder. That's passive communication, right? Pick up the phone, walk 30 yards down the hall to the plant and let the supervisor know, hey, we've got a change order, right? And once he started doing that, it allowed them to make the changes on the fly. And in most cases, they hadn't gotten to that production step yet. So huge time savings. And the reason I'm I'm chuckling is, as I explained the difference between passive communication and active communication, where the VP of engineering, well, what if I can't make the phone call or I can't walk down the hall? Can I send them an email? And I'm like, would you send the fire department an email if your house was on fire? He said, no, of course not. I'm like, well, it's the same thing here, right? If there's a change that's coming through that's going to impact customer satisfaction and manufacturing's ability to deliver, it requires active communication, right? Pick up the phone, take a walk, make sure that the interested party knows that a change needs to be made. And subsequent to that, the engineering manager pulled me in the hall and says, hey, I got a question for you. I'm like, yeah, okay, shoot. If I put a return receipt on the email, does that change it from passive to active? I said, okay, that's a good question. No. Return receipt simply shows that the email has been opened. It doesn't show that it's been digested or understood or actioned. So no, again, thanks for asking the question, but no, a return receipt doesn't change it from passive to active, right? And that is just reinforces the kind of the key underpinnings of this process. It's all about communication, right? When there's a change that comes up, let's make sure we're talking to the right people at the right time about the right things, so everybody knows what's going on. Okay, all right. So third case study, right? So this was a manufacturer and distributor of personal protective equipment. $350 million business, very, very neat business, very well regarded in their industry. And they too had a challenge of, inventory was growing faster than sales. So as we looked at their inventory growth on the balance sheet, maybe it was growing at a 6 or 7% clip. Sales was growing at a 4 or 5% clip. And, working with the business, what we saw was that they had a really, really, really complex product portfolio. And this was a challenge because from sales perspective, right? Sales wants to sell everything to anyone and they never want to run out of product. So it may be something that they sold once a year. And if the minimum order quantity was 10 pieces, effectively they're sitting on 10 years worth of inventory. So, diving down deeper again through that, the lens of S&OP, this time really focusing on sales, it was using the data to drive the conversation to say, hey, when we look at your inventory, half of your inventory does not turn more than 2 times a year. And because of that, we are just trapping cash in the business. So there is cash tied up in product that's not moving, that the business needed to buy more of the product that was moving, right? So this was a case of it was really a double whammy where working capital was going up and going through the roof, but revenue actually started to decline because they didn't have enough of the right product at the right time. And one of the steps we took as we implemented S&OP was to go through a product portfolio rationalization. Hey, these items that are the C's and D's, the cats and dogs that you sell a handful of times a year and make basically no margin, do we really need those products in our portfolio? If somebody can't get a D, are they really going to stop buying a product that's an A? Right. So it was challenging the historical norms for the business to help them see, hey, for us to be better suppliers, we need to do a better job of managing our product portfolio. And with this business, because the portfolio, even after it was rationalized, was still very, very complex, 5 distribution centers, 10,000 plus customers. This was a process where S&OP formed the backbone And then we helped the business find planning software to help forecast and plan the process. And with this business, we were able to take out just over $2 million of inventory in the first half of last year. So again, it comes back to having a process that's definable, predictable, repeatable, and keeping those lines of communication open. So one of the core mantras of S&OP is no surprises, right? And we all know, we're all adults, most surprises aren't good ones. So let's try to get ahead of it. So when you know something isn't going to happen as planned, whether it's a bad thing or a good thing, let's figure out, let's talk about it and figure out in what ways we want to respond. So, when we talk about S&OP, right, the WIFM, the what's in it for me, right? Each function of the business, everybody who contributes will get something out of the process. And then from the holistic business perspective and customer perspective, right? As a business, it can help increase revenue. From a customer service perspective, it can help us improve our fill rate on-time delivery because we're doing a better job with schedule attainment and making the right things at the right time. Right? Added benefit is that it helps accelerate inventory turns, and literally the bottom line for a business, right? For a private business, it's EBITDA. For a public business, it's EBIT. But either way, these improvements by linking people, process, and technology all create a bottom line result. So when we bring it all together and put a bow on it, the S&OP process is about creating complementary goals. So we're all working together, we're all singing off the same sheet of music, we're all rowing in the same direction, and that creates the cross-functional benefits, right? It shouldn't be, hey, this function is going to do well at the expense of another function, right? That's not sustainable. So how do we align on our goals and our benefits? And in creating that, literally that same sheet of music, right, we come together with one set of numbers. So we've got the production number that lines up with the sales number and lines up with the inventory number. All right, you guys have been a very good audience. What I'd like to do now is open it up to questions and answers. I know we've got one in the queue. So here's a little bit of my background. That QR code is a link to my LinkedIn profile. And I would invite anybody, if there's any questions or would like to connect, to please reach out. Eric?
Thank you, Mike, for helping us navigate sales and operations planning. We'll take some questions now. So the first one is, who participates in the partnership meeting portion of the S&OP process?
That is a fantastic question. So in the partnership meeting, if we think about what leads up to it, the demand review and the supply review, in the demand review, we've got sales leadership, typically the VP of sales or the chief revenue officer. In the supply meeting, we typically have VP supply, VP supply chain, VP operations, VP manufacturing, who are coordinating the efforts of their staffs and their organization. In the partnership meeting, it's typically the functional heads from across the organization, and then their number one or number two person who helps translate strategy into execution. So in the partnership meeting, we'll have sales, marketing, manufacturing, supply chain, finance, and the executive team, right? Typically at least the CFO, if not the CEO as well.
Okay. What are some of the biggest risks you see in understanding and responding to customers' needs?
Some of the biggest risks are, and I think this was just beat into me at GE, is that if we don't make our customers happy, somebody else is going to make our customer happy. And ultimately, by having the right people talk about the right things at the right time, S&OP helps us mitigate risk. So what it lets us do, and I'm going through this with a client now, is as we look further out, as we look into the third quarter, this client, they expect a little softness in August and September. So because the revenue in effect is going to be a little bit soft, a little bit below plan, right? Sales has the action to do what they can to help, bring sales back up to plan and back in line. And then corresponding with supply, it helps the manufacturing team create contingency plans of, hey, I know now that if sales can't close this goal, right, I'm going to have some people who are idle. So are there plant PMs that I can utilize them for? Can I utilize them in other areas of the business, maybe to shore up some, staffing shortages someplace else? So what this is doing is giving manufacturing that longer horizon to be able to plan, right? Because, I've been in manufacturing a long time, and, having a down week or a week without pay, right? It's never a good thing for that workforce. But what I found is, right, it's far better to say, hey, we're going to take a waiting week, or we're going to take a furlough week, the first week in July, and let them know now so they can plan, as opposed to letting them know the last Friday of the month that, hey, you guys are furloughed next week. So that, being able to look further out, both on the demand side and the supply side, and put them together, helps a business be planful and mindful and respond as opposed to just reacting.
All right, Mike, we have another question. Are there any specific distinctions or challenges relating to aerospace manufacturing versus manufacturing in other industries?
Ooh, that's a great question. And a question that I would not have been able to answer before 2020. So one of the things, I'll say it's unique to aerospace, but it is also shared with some other, I'll call it technical manufacturing industries, is that especially when it comes to materials, if you are out of a particular grade of steel or a particular grade of aluminum, it's not like you can just go to another supplier, right? You have to have vetted suppliers who are ISO compliant. You need to be able to have documentation and certification all the way up the supply chain. So one of the challenges with aerospace, especially, if there's an opportunity to, increase delivery or, respond to an increase in demand, is making sure that you've got not only the right materials at the right time, but enough of the right materials at the right time. So, aerospace, in my experience, is not a just-in-time industry. It's a very planful industry, because a lot of the components, especially the engineered components, there may be other vendors in the process, right? Hey, I'm going to machine this part, then I need to send it out to get anodized, and that's going to take 2 weeks, and then it's got to come back in, and I need to do this operation, and it's got to go outside to be tested. So, there are definitely levels of complexity in the aerospace industry, where I think the only other industry that I have experience with that has a similar level of complexity is the pharmaceutical industry, right? Same thing, lot traceability, right? It's not like I can pick up the phone on Friday and order something for Monday. So I think it's those characteristics where it's highly engineered, it's precision, it needs to be traceable, that make the aerospace industry a little bit harder than, kind of a run-of-the-mill manufacturing business.
All right. So here's sort of a loaded question. How do you ascertain the level of confidence from sales, particularly in custom products?
Ooh, I love that question. And I will not to be, I will try not to be a smart aleck in responding to that question. The best way, and I love this because it's a judo flip back onto sales, especially for custom products, the best way to maximize confidence is to say, get me a purchase order. I am not going to buy anything or make anything that is custom that I can only sell to one customer if I don't have a PO in hand. That is, and it's uncomfortable, right? For salespeople, it can be very uncomfortable, but you got to get a PO. So if there's something that truly is custom and can only be sold to one customer, the best way to mitigate risk is by getting a PO in hand or saying, hey, get me a long-term agreement that says over the next 12 months, you expect to buy X number of pieces. And if you buy less than X number of pieces, then you need to reimburse us for the raw materials that we purchased. So in my mind, that's the best way to mitigate risk is like, hey man, get me a signed order and then I'll do whatever you want me to do.
Okay. Another question might require some speculation, but what's the typical duration from request for information until passing the first article inspection for a typical aerospace machine part? And I know there's no typical part.
I can't speak to that. I could probably fake my way through it, but I'm sure there's probably other people on the call who could answer that better than I can.
Okay.
So I appreciate the question, but I've got to pass on that one.
All right. Well, what do you recommend as the minimum KPIs to review across the S&OP process groups?
Great question. So I am a huge proponent of, I call it the look back. I've worked in so many businesses and so many industries that once the month closes, right, we're done, and they never look back. The foundational, fundamental part of S&OP is, hey, right, we're in the month of June. Hey, what was my plan for May and what did I deliver, right? So if my sales plan said, I'm going to bring in $529,000 of revenue, sales, how did you do against that plan, right? Did you bring in 550 or did you bring in 505? So forecast attainment or sales attainment to plan is the number one indicator or KPI on the demand side, right? How did we do versus how we said we were going to do? And based on that gap, how does that inform the forecast moving forward, right? So if the May goal was 529,000 and I sold 550, right? Am I going to take that extra and knock down the out months? Am I going to say next month is going to be just as strong? Am I going to say next month is going to be weak because I oversold this month? So sales attainment or forecast attainment for demand, that's the number one KPI. For manufacturing, there's two. One is schedule attainment. So hey, I've made a plan to build 134 pieces this month. How many did I build? Did I build 134, 103, 150? Right. So number one is schedule attainment. And then number two is going to be, what's my fill rate? What's my on-time delivery? Can I make and ship to a customer when I said that I'm going to make and ship? So those for me are the primary KPIs. And then from a financial perspective, it's also looking at the working capital and the inventory turns and how much cash is tied up on the balance sheet.
Okay, you mentioned forecasting several times. What are you seeing with forecasting and demand planning technology?
It is getting better and better and better. I'll say it like this, right? And this, my crystal ball is cracked. It's been cracked for almost 30 years. And the forecast will always be wrong, always. The question is, how wrong is it, right? If my forecast accuracy is between 93 and 95%, that is truly world-class. It's when my forecast accuracy, dips below 80, 75, we see ripple effects in terms of either buying too much of the wrong stuff or building too much of the wrong stuff. So technology, demand planning, forecasting, and supply planning technology in the last 10 years has come a long way to, number one, identifying exceptions, right? So if we're over or under in the last month, how do we want to handle it going forward? And helping focus on first what moves the needle, and second, where there's, I call it the small knob or the fine tuning, right? What do we need to fine tune to align the plan with what we expect to sell and what we expect to make? So technology, and depending on the business size, and existing, ERP or MRP technology, all the good forecasting and demand planning technologies can bolt onto, existing systems.
Is there any way to determine what's the best mix of forecasting from internal and external sources, or is it trial by error?
That's a great question. And I mean, forecasting is an iterative process. So you start out with a base forecast or a statistical forecast, and then a planner will make forecast adjustments. That's the adjusted forecast. And then we'll get input from sales, and that's the collaborative forecast. And then we bring it to the leadership team and we get a consensus forecast. So if you think about it, each forecast cycle has 4 versions of the forecast, right? And I'm an engineer. I love math, right? We can measure all of those. So sometimes the adjusted stat is the most accurate. Sometimes the collaborative with the sales input is the most accurate. And by being able to measure accuracy of the forecast as it evolves, it helps us focus in. And typically, as part of the collaborative forecast, the sales team is not only bringing back information from the customers, they're bringing back information from the market, right? Here are the trends. The market's going up, the market's going down. Hey, there's uncertainty in this sector because of this, and we think it's going to tamp our forecast down a little bit. So bringing in outside information, both from customers and the industry, is critical to really refining that S&OP process.
Okay, we have time for one final question. Are there templates or S&OP software available to help the S&OP manager collect and analyze data and then put it in presentation form?
I would say there are probably some examples out there, but it truly is a case of, I'm going to call it Goldilocks, where depending on the needs of the business, how mature the businesses are, how mature the technology is, right? The templates can be very, very simple or extraordinarily complex. So what I would say is start with the 1, 2, or 3 KPIs that are most critical to your business, figure out how to measure them and at what level. So is it total business? Is it the aftermarket and original equipment? Is it individual product lines or individual parts? So find out, what altitude is the most meaningful for your business and start tracking KPIs at that level.
All right. I have one final question. You talked about communication and maybe assigning responsibility. It would seem there would be an opportunity for blame amongst these groups. How do you diffuse or avoid that once you get these people talking together and trying to get them all in the same direction?
That is a great question. So number one, it's by helping define accountabilities. So, hey, the head of sales is responsible for all sales. This person is responsible for sales in this channel. So, right, step 1 is accountability. Step 2 is, quite frankly, we document, right? So here's the plan. We document our assumptions. So a month or 6 months or a year from now, we can go back and look and say, why did I make that assumption? What do I know now that I didn't know then? And in terms of the, staying away from the blame game, quite frankly, a lot of times it's about approach. It's, hey, your metric said 175,000, you came in at 140,000, right? Help me understand what the gap is. So, help me understand is a very non-threatening way to ask the question. Right. The threatening way is, hey, goofball, right? You told me this, you dropped the ball. What the hell happened? Right. So part of it is approach, respect, right? And it's the golden rule. Treat other people like you want to be treated. So
Okay. Well, thank you, Mike. We are out of time. And thanks again to our manufacturing group series sponsors, Carlisle Interconnect Technologies and Renishaw, Schunk, and SMW Autobot. Be sure to register for our upcoming free webinars by clicking on the hamburger menu tab of our websites, the 3 horizontal lines on the header bar, and on the drop-down menu, click the events link, 5 down from the top. If you have any comments or suggestions, please email them to me at ebrothers@gie.net. On behalf of Aerospace Manufacturing and Design, I wish you a good day and goodbye for now.
You can listen to all of our episodes of Manufacturing Matters and Lunch and Learn podcast from the MFG Radio Network on Spotify, Apple Music, and on our websites, todaysmedicaldevelopments.com, aerospacemanufacturinganddesign.com, defenseandmunitions.com, and evdesignandmanufacturing.com.